Now, Leviticus, you know where that is? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Leviticus is a book of the details of the law, how the law works. You will find, and you can read Leviticus. Don't let anybody tell you you can't read Leviticus. Somebody said, nobody ever reads that. Well, I said, it's clear to me that you don't. It gives the law of cleansing for the leper. There is a sacrifice, an animal sacrifice for leprosy, and leprosy is a disease. You knew that, right? It's in chapter 14. Verse 2, the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. The law of the leper. There was a law. There was a sacrifice for disease. That's very important. A sacrifice for disease, because the church world today says God doesn't heal today. You know what that means? I'm going to say this several times. If the sacrifice of an animal would eliminate leprosy and the sacrifice of Jesus would not, and that's what the church says, God doesn't heal today, then Jesus is not the same yesterday, today, and forever. God changes. He said, I'm the Lord thy God, I change not. If he used to, based on animal sacrifice, but when we come to the new covenant and the death of Jesus, he doesn't do that anymore, or he may or he might not. Then we were wiser to stand in the old covenant where he healed. You see that. Now, this leper is going to come to the priest. The priest is going to sign the paperwork. I'm not sure they had any paper, but let's just pretend. And he's going to examine him, and then he's going to tell him, verse 4, to bring 2 birds, cedar wood, scarlet, and hyssop. 2 birds. Usually, the birds aren't specific here. Usually it's the pigeon or the dove in most other sacrifices. He said, you bring those. And the priest, verse 5, is going to command that the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. Now, look over to Hebrews. Keep your finger right there. We'll be right back. Let me show you something. The Old Testament is a type or a shadow or an example of the new. When you read the Old, you can see the new coming. Now, if you go to chapter 8, Hebrews, verse 5, it's talking about the Old Testament priests in verse 3 and 4. The Old Testament priests, which were of the tribe of Levi, saying Jesus, if he were here today, could not be a priest in the Old Testament sense because he was of the tribe of Judah. Okay. In other words, he's going to be a different kind of priest. And then it says, verse 5, who serve under the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. See, he said, you make all things according to the pattern showed thee in the mountain. The Old Testament is the words example, shadow, and pattern are used. And when you read the Old, you're supposed to see in the Old some dimension of the new that's coming. For us, it's already come. Now, an example is a pattern or a copy. You have a copy machine. We have 2 at the house, copy machines. And that machine puts a copy of the original that's under the lid. Right? You know where I'm at? And those are all duplicates. So the Old Covenant is a duplicate of something. It's a duplicate of Calvary. It's a pattern. Well, did anybody sew? I used to sew. And I made up my mind, if I ever have any money, I'll never sew again. I have kept my word. I have kept my word. I made Wayne's sport coats. I was very good at it. I didn't like it. And one day, we had enough money to buy things. God's more than enough. He's more than enough. He's El Shaddai, the God of all plenty, the all-sufficient one. Okay. He's talking about the law. Verse 4, according to the law was an example. That pattern, you can sew that pattern together. It's tissue paper. You haven't got anything. It does look like the dress. Does anybody make dresses anymore? No, I haven't seen one this year. No. It looks like what's on the front of the cover of the pattern, but it isn't the same. The Old Testament looks like the New, but it isn't the same as the New. It's old.